Let's get down to brass tacks.
Over the years, I've expressed various issues that bother me about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. But today, I would like to acknowledge an aspect that not only intrigues me, but I think needs to be appreciated more. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 from 2009 stands as one of the most divisive entries in the Halloween franchise. Yet, one aspect that demands closer examination is its haunting depiction of Laurie Strode. Unlike her portrayals in other installments, this version of Laurie is deeply fractured. A woman suffocating under the weight of unresolved trauma, survivor's guilt, and the destabilizing grip of her own mind. While Zombie's vision may be polarizing, his depiction of Laurie is arguably the most complex and emotionally raw interpretation the franchise has ever seen. Through 5 key examples, Halloween 2 illustrates how Laurie's mental state deteriorates, transforming her into a tragic figure whose descent feels painfully authentic.
It's no secret that Zombie likes messy characters, and why should his surviving Laurie be any different? While this may be giving the director a tad too much credit, this version of Laurie almost feels like a deliberate subversion, forcing us to truly look at what final girls endure instead of always wanting them to be plucky, headstrong heroines who triumph. Surprisingly, Zombie's Laurie forces us to see the real trauma, both physical and mental, that we often forget these girls go through.
In previous incarnations, Laurie Strode was often portrayed as a resilient, yet composed figure. In John Carpenter's original Halloween from 1978, Laurie was the quintessential final girl, cautious, responsible, and fiercely protective of her friends. Even in Halloween H2O in 1998, where Laurie grapples with post-traumatic stress, she maintains a functional life, masking her fear behind a controlled exterior. Rob Zombie's version of Laurie, however, is a stark departure from this mold. In Halloween 2, she is volatile, impulsive, and profoundly broken. The events of the previous film, surviving Michael Myers' attack, losing her friends, and discovering her true identity, have left her spiraling. Zombie's Laurie isn't simply a survivor, she's a victim still battling her trauma long after the physical threat has subsided. This version of Laurie trades the traditional final girl resilience for a character portrait that feels raw, messy, and tragically human. From the opening scenes, it's clear that Laurie's trauma has consumed her. The film opens with a brutal hospital sequence that later reveals itself to be a nightmare, a reflection of Laurie's subconscious turmoil. This dream sequence serves as a powerful metaphor, illustrating how her mind is trapped in a state of constant fear and violence.
The nightmare itself is another stark reminder of what Laurie has endured. Implied to be at least part memory, we see the physical damage Laurie's body has undergone and the lengths taken to save her. Final girls often endure extreme amounts of violence in their final confrontations with their respective boogeymen, and as viewers, we often forget this in our enthusiasm for the damage they inflict on the bad guy. The movies don't often stop to linger on the results of this violence the way Zombies does. And while it's hard to take, maybe in some way it's important to remember how much violence these young women undergo in these situations and reflect on what this would truly do to a person. Laurie's continued nightmare shows the violence which now lives within her own mind and which we see expanded upon as the film goes on. Her mind is full of horrific and bloody images, and as she wails and screams for help in the dream, the helplessness she feels and the impending danger looming over her becomes more and more palpable. This incredibly intimate look inside her mind lets us see how damaged she's become and should elicit sympathy, not disdain. We expect our final girls to hold it together, but how can they when this is what it's like inside their own head?
Laurie's day-to-day life is no less chaotic. She moved in with Annie Brackett, another survivor, and Sheriff Brackett, yet her surroundings offer little comfort. Laurie lashes out unpredictably, her relationships strained as she wrestles with grief. One notable example is her breakdown at the dinner table. where she erupts in anger, exposing her inner conflict. Rather than processing her trauma in a healthy way, Laurie masks her pain with hostility and self-destructive behavior. This Laurie feels dangerously real, a victim who has no roadmap for coping with her shattered reality. Unlike her prior incarnations, who remain collected under pressure, this version shows Laurie deteriorating because she's never had the chance to heal. Zombies Halloween 2 highlights Laurie's descent into reckless behavior as she attempts to escape her pain. In several scenes, Laurie turns to alcohol, drugs, and chaotic social environments in a desperate attempt to numb her trauma. The Halloween party sequence is particularly telling. Laurie's night of drinking and heavy metal excess is less about enjoyment and more about drowning her inner torment. This unraveling feels far removed from the composed Laurie Strode of earlier films. In Halloween H2O, Laurie numbs her pain with wine, but still manages to maintain control. In contrast, Zombies Laurie spirals aggressively, embodying a far more dangerous self-destructive streak. This behavior underscores a key theme in Halloween 2. Trauma doesn't always manifest as quiet sorrow. Sometimes it emerges as reckless defiance.
Again, we should question why we as an audience are far more comfortable with the more contained final girl, the one making herself quieter and smaller in order to repress and forget her trauma. Why are we so unsympathetic to a final girl who loses herself in her trauma, whose coping mechanisms may be similar to our own, whose grief explodes from her instead of turning inwards? Zombies Laurie may be unsubtle and in your face, but maybe she's too much of a mirror of how we ourselves would be under such immense trauma. Which does lead to the discussion of escapism and why we love to see a final girl triumph. But, as with all genres, sometimes horror needs to be a little realer, a little closer to home in order to drive into the audience the true horrors of the world. Sometimes, the subtle brush needs to be traded in for the swinging sledgehammer. And if ever there was a director for that job, it's Zombie, whose Laurie hits with all the subtlety of a brick.
One of the most emotionally devastating layers of Laurie's story in Halloween 2 is her relationship with Annie. As fellow survivors, they should share a bond of solidarity, yet their dynamic is painfully strained. Annie's attempts to provide stability are met with Laurie's volatile outbursts. The pivotal bathroom scene stands as one of the film's most intense emotional moments, and perhaps one of the most emotional moments in the entire Halloween franchise, covering 12 other films besides this. Laurie, overwhelmed by anxiety and spiraling thoughts, accuses Annie of being unsympathetic, despite Annie enduring her own trauma. Laurie's misplaced anger reveals the corrosive nature of her guilt. She cannot accept comfort because her mind has fixated on her own suffering. This fractured friendship highlights one of Zombie's boldest ideas, that trauma isolates victims. Laurie isn't just grieving her friend's death, she's burdened by the overwhelming sense that no one can truly understand what she's enduring.
Interestingly, Annie much more embodies what we've come to expect from Final Girl. She's obviously still traumatized, but she seems to be dealing with it healthily, similarly to Sidney Prescott of Scream 2 or Julie James of I Still Know. Annie seems to still have a lightness to her, joking with her dad, reassuring Laurie, and trying to maintain a happy life in the face of the horror that they've all endured. Again, this may be giving too much credit to Zombie, but it almost feels intentional to have the character more in line with the typical Final Girl be the best friend character, while the messy and traumatized survivor is front and center. Zombie isn't here for stable characters. He almost seems to look down on them, and this is practically confirmed with Annie's death, almost as if she's being punished for being so well adjusted and creating a stark contrast to the surviving Laurie's mental turmoil.
A major turning point for Laurie's downward spiral occurs when she discovers her true identity. She is Angel Myers, Michael Myers' sister. This revelation, delivered via Dr. Loomis's exploitative book, shatters Laurie's fragile sense of self. Learning that she shares blood with Michael amplifies her mental deterioration. Laurie feels cursed, as though her brother's violence has tainted her existence. This is particularly evident in her increasingly chaotic mental state, marked by hallucinations of Michael and visions of their mother. These surreal sequences blur the lines between reality and Laurie's fractured mind, symbolizing her struggle to separate her identity from Michael's darkness.
While even the more enthusiastic fans of this film will admit that the White Horse visions are a little bizarre, when it comes to Laurie's visions, there does seem to be somewhat of a missed opportunity. As her mind struggles to adjust to her true origins, it would have been really interesting to see Dee Wallace return and have Laurie's two mothers battle for her mind. Maybe I'm just reaching too far in hopes of making Zombie's bizarre visions make more narrative sense, but if they truly are supposed to represent Laurie's mind and inner darkness, it stands to reason that we should see the other side battling, showing that she's slowly giving into darkness due to everything she's endured, not to mention the familial link she feels to the monster responsible.
Where past versions of Laurie Strode fought to distance themselves from Michael, Zombie's Laurie feels inescapably tethered to him. Her unraveling isn't just about trauma, it's about fear that she's destined to become part of the same cycle of violence. The film's brutal climax offers the most harrowing depiction of Laurie's fractured psyche. After witnessing Michael murder Annie, Laurie's fragile mind fully shatters. In the aftermath, she steps outside wearing Michael's mask, a haunting visual that suggests that Laurie has succumbed to the violence she's tried so desperately to resist. In the film's final moments, Laurie is institutionalized, shown sitting alone in a sterile white room. As she stares forward, she sees the ghostly image of her mother, a callback to Michael's own visions throughout the film. This chilling sequence suggests that Laurie's mind has reached a point of no return. The film leaves her fate ambiguous. Has she truly become like Michael, or is she simply trapped in a mental prison built from trauma and guilt?
It feels again like Zombie is scratching at a decent idea, one which we've seen manifest in more recent horrors. Is evil inherited? Is it passed down through our genes? And what does it mean for the final girl to have this connection, to have this inner darkness that makes her just a little bit insane? Is she doomed by the narrative, or can she make her own choice? Zombie's conclusion is bleak, as we see Laurie succumb to her apparent inner monster. But recently, we've seen the Scream series veer into this territory, taking a somewhat more optimistic view with Sam Carpenter, the final girl in the 5th and 6th installments of the franchise. Like Laurie, Sam has a blood connection to a boogeyman, in this case, original Ghostface Billy Loomis, and the two films which feature Sam toy with the idea of her inner darkness overtaking her. Scream gives Sam more agency in this struggle, as opposed to Zombie's Laurie, who seems so doomed from the start. But it is interesting that Zombie started to explore this angle before it crept into more mainstream horror.
This bleak ending cements Laurie as a tragic figure, not because she's evil, but because her unresolved pain consumed her. Unlike previous Halloween films, where Laurie emerged as a triumphant survivor, Zombie's interpretation suggests that survival sometimes comes at a devastating psychological cost. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 takes significant creative liberties with Laurie Strode, but his portrayal presents a deeply human and deeply broken character. By depicting Laurie as a volatile and grief-stricken victim, Zombie crafts a version of her that feels painfully authentic. Through her survivor's guilt, self-destructive behavior, fractured relationships, and overwhelming identity crisis, this version of Laurie becomes a tragic embodiment of unresolved trauma. Unlike her counterparts in other films, Laurie in Halloween 2 doesn't simply face her fears, she's consumed by them. For fans accustomed to seeing Laurie as a symbol of resilience, this interpretation may feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort is precisely what makes Zombie's vision resonate. By stripping away the final girl archetype, Halloween 2 offers one of the most haunting and deeply human explorations of psychological trauma in modern horror.